Hey everybody, this is John Solders, Bishop John Solders, and I'm your host this evening, this morning, or whenever you watch this. This will be posted widely across multiple platforms, and we're here doing what it is that we do in part in this space, in this place. We call these relevant conversations with me, your host, John Solders, and tonight. I'm glad to be back. We took a little bit of a hiatus, as it were, and now we're back. And wanna do just a little bit of conversation with one of my favorite people to do the kind of conversating I feel like we're gonna be doing, right? With this pastor, this thinker. He has. He's an HBCU graduate. Amen. Praise the Lord. I like just saying that. That just makes me feel good. But has a wide variety of spaces and places where he has done some of his both thinking and working. He's continuing on and all of that kind of stuff. I have found him to be both sincere and passionate, and also little bit of a radical. Dare I say that without people, getting all funny? But actually thinking and sharing and doing. It's a pretty remarkable thing to think that you have something to say. That something to say will move people to show up over and over and over again. And I'm talking about pastoring, and in particular in the setting and in the context of Chicago, Illinois. Let me bring to our platform. We're going to talk about a couple of things, and let me bring to this platform the Reverend Patrick Schaefer from City of Faith Church in Chicago, Illinois, Southside.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
I am great. I'm great. It's good to see you. Good to talk with you.
Absolutely. I was remarking, as you know, before we went live tonight. Last time we had a conversation about a week or so ago. We talk, you and I talk, as often as we do, and all of a sudden, I had one of them moments. Here you go. The preacher sure preached good. Question comes, what did he preach about? I don't know, but it's sure good, right? The last time we were having a conversation, it got good to me, and then we had to go,
Yeah.
And I was like, man, it's often, you want to put that lightning in the bottle, you want to package it and then recreate it. But as often is the case when we talk, we start getting into it, and then it'll be what it'll be. So, amen. I think God will show God's self up, and if God don't, then at least we here, and we got a little bit of God flowing through
Absolutely.
us. We'll do what we do. Listen.
Absolutely. Before we start, can I say something real quick?
You can't say nothing.
No,
to talk.
can't say nothing.
Yeah.
No, I just want you to know that you are one of a great gift to me. We met through our dear precious ancestor now, which
I can't even talk about that.
still
Leave that
trying
alone.
to wrap my mind around
Right.
around that. But I remember the night we met, and we have been in a running conversation for the last 20, maybe 15, 17, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of life has happened for you and for me. And we've been in each other's lives, and we just, it's funny. You look around and you realize that, oh, we're doing life together. And I'm glad to be doing life with you. You are a spiritual and intellectual blood bank for me. And so when I need to learn something, or if I have questions, or if I want to probe deeper, you are that space to me. And that's precious to me. And so I just wanted you to know that. If I try to tell you, I think we're good at communicating those things, but you know, we getting, time keeps moving. And so I want to let people know who means something to me, what they mean to me. And so
I appreciate that.
very, very, very much.
I appreciate
And thank
that.
you.
And you're welcome. Listen, I hear the young people say you better give them people's flowers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And I hear, when I hear that phrase, I hear James Cleveland on the Pinana.
Yeah.
With
the angelic choir.
Right, with the angelic choir. Yes, sir. See,
I know, right?
Right, not many young people know that version.
Right.
Give me my flowers, why I can sell them.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you.
So I can experience the beauty that flowers. And I appreciate that very much. You too, for me, or God saying, that meeting that we had many years ago was significant, and I didn't know at the time the life that keeps on lifing, right? That we have gone through, and certainly we have commiserated over a great deal and a great number of things over that time. I think about these times we're living in, this contemporary context that we both are sharing in ministry. And now, let me say a couple of things as a precursor, and then let's just go. I'm glad that the record button is on, and we just go. Think about this. So historically, let me do some set. This within the last few days. 103 years ago, Dick Rowland was on the elevator with a white woman. Her name was Sarah Page. Something happened in that elevator, we don't know. But the next thing you know, Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma was in flames. And over the course of a couple of days, hundreds of people were killed. 35 city blocks laid charred and ruined. They were dropping bombs. We had just come out of World War One. Brothers got suited up, and Dick was down there at the police station. It just was an old-fashioned mess. Over what has gone, what we know within Black communities and spaces happens happen often, where a case was made, an accusation was made, and all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. That happened 103 years ago, around this time, in Tulsa. I'm thinking about that. So that there's this kind of historic context. I'm thinking about just a few days ago, 35 34 counts was levied. 30, hey, let me say it again. 34 counts was levied against the former commander in chief of the United States of America. Right? Here we are, 2024. And so for me, that's a kind of a, those are two kind of bookends that I'm thinking, related to the question I'm going to ask, and then we can parse this out, as we go for the next little bit of time. What does it mean to be the prophet? And let me just say what I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about those who have in one way or another, not in any kind of particular, but you and I have a particular assignments, as I understand it. But here we are. We are here to say what I think are, to stand in a particular position and say forth what we believe are truths to be considered for, folk who would call us pastor, right? And we, in our own right, have our own platforms and spaces where we can hold forth. I'm thinking about what what's been turning in my spirit and in my head and in my thoughts. What says the prophet now? And let me also one more piece of frame, and then I'll shut up. So I'm thinking about Nathan in the Hebrew scriptures. He goes in to speak to the king, David, and he tells a story to the king, and the king is outdone. He's well off with his head or something, some phrase. He's just outdone with the story that was told by the prophet. And the prophet says, "That's you, David. You are the person I just described." And he called David. So that's one framing of the role of a prophet, right? Somebody who can say something, who can see something, who is not balked. I like that phrase of
Shirley Chisholm.
Unbossed and unbalked, right? So I'm gonna shut up and what say you in some opening observations?
I have been mournful about our silence, not what we say, but what we are not saying. Isaiah speaks to us, right? It says, "Cry loud and spare not. Lift up your voice like a trumpet in Zion. Show my people their transgressions, in the house of Jacob their sins." I think Donald Trump comes at the worst time for Black Americans and the Black church specifically, because we have so assimilated and so cozied up to power that we are not questioning and we are not skeptical of power. I think we got lulled to sleep under an Obama presidency, right? That we did not speak truth to power when there were questionable governing practices that were happening, when we were being objectified and used as pawns to make political points, to make him seem tough on his own people while making white mainstream more comfortable. He was doing this balancing act, and we went along with it. And I think we got into a rhythm of our silence so much that when Trump came, right, and it was confusing because you had this idolater, you had this philanderer, you had everything that they tell us to be Christians that you're supposed to be. He was not any of that. And yet you had Black preachers, right? And the rise of Christian nationalism in the evangelical church, who just showed they hold behind. And I don't know if we realized what we were seeing, right? When from Kenneth Copeland to Hagin to Paula White, all of them were showing all their true colors. And I'm sitting there, I'm wondering, well, okay, well, this is the time of the Black preacher, right? This is where we use our voice and make public our Christian witness. Silence. And our silence makes us complicit. We wanted to cozy up the power, and there's always going to be, a couple of Black Negroes who are going to dance, for some attention or a seat at, a meeting with the president and all those different kind of things. And now that it seems to have matured into this guy. Look, you gotta, with Donald Trump, there is some appreciation for the art of being a horrible person and a horrible public figure. So much that he manufactures his own Bible and then puts the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in it and then sells it. And the audacity of it is so shocking that I don't know if the Black pulpit knows what to say or what to think about. Some of us do, right? Those of us who have been paying attention. But I am interested, so interested in the silence of everybody who seems to be famous, Christian famous, for absolutely nothing, only to have attention. But when we need you to cry loud, to spare not, to speak truth to power, can't find you. Cannot find you. And so I want to make a critique of what has been coming out of the pulpit towards power and oppressive system and institutional racism and two-tiered systems and all those things that we see that's happening in our criminal justice system as it relates to Donald Trump. But I can't make a critique because nobody's saying anything, right? My critique has to be of the silence itself, the sin of our silence. And it's startling to me. And, in our tradition, we talk about, especially preachers and young pastors who are aspiring to do great things and God's going to raise you up. And my question is, in this hour, raise you up for what? To do what? To say what? I don't see. I just see us having church, or more times than not, from what I'm hearing from the pulpit, is that preachers can't get in the pulpit and preach from the Bible. They can't preach unless they are preaching against other preachers or other traditions or other this and other that. And I'm like, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got that going on, right? We got a rush to celebrity, right? So it's about being popular and the celebrity kind of thing. And can I just say, our beloved ancestor was the prototype of that in some ways. He represented, much of that, at least in its earliest form. I saw a documentary just recently about Apostle Fred K.C. Price, and remembered, the 70s. Evidence. There's your life, sure enough. These two Black men who were on Christian television at that time. All right, okay. So we got, and I'm with you. There's a critique of the silence, but I want to even talk, even maybe go a little bit deeper to talk at least, or to.
Can we put a pin right here, for a minute, because you brought it up, Reverend Dr. K.C. Price.
Yes.
You remember that little incident that happened, late 80s, early 90s, between him and Carlton Pearson?
I do.
Over race. And it was ugly. It was it was ugly, and I thought it was ugly of Casey Price. I thought he went hard, but you know, I re I rewatched I rewatched that his whole preaching and teaching, and what he was talking about was race, and he was talking about racism in America, and he was talking and making a critique of the black bourgeoisie and its assimilation into
Mhm,
the suburbs and
mhm.
the emerging multicultural church and all these different kind of things. And he was speaking from a church he built in Inglewood,
Yep.
right? He was in the ghetto. He stayed in the ghetto.
Mhm,
Um, and you know, I rewatched that and I said, you know what? He was right. Like, I know we didn't want him to be right, just like we didn't want Jeremiah Wright to be right. But there are times when prophets come and their truth is inconvenient for what the social masses, what the cultural masses may want at that moment, right? Because we wanted a black president and we wanted him and Mr. Obama, we wanted it right now. It's like, yeah, well, you know, Jeremiah, you may be right, but this is our agenda right now. But that doesn't make him less right or less prophetic because we turned away from the truth. His truth was the truth. And he's still right to this day and has been proven and affirmed right over and
mhm,
over again
mhm.
to this very day.
That's
So,
right. And what's amazing for me is that I had the opportunity and had relationship enough
mhm,
to ask Bishop Pearson about that, right? And to ask him on the other side of 2000 and his fall from, you know, the heights that
mhm,
he once lived in and did ministry in, and he said, you know, the sheer arrogance he felt of himself
mhm,
to have written to, you know, in his thinking at the time was, hey man, let's do some unity building. Let's don't call each other out in the way that Carlton Pearson would talk
mhm,
and do. You know him, I know him, and so, you know, and he was also reflective that Dr. Price not only probably did the right thing calling him out, and he needed to be called out, and you know, and struggled with what that meant, you know, as he looked in hindsight, you know, to do
sure.
reparative work, I guess,
Mhm,
to live differently than what those days are. And what's interesting is that we did not want, you know, as much as we wanted Carlton to be what we thought what he thought he was, we didn't ever want him to move from there, right? First off, we didn't, you know, we never did really
mhm,
remove him and say, hey, you can evolve like all of us can. We can
mhm,
grow and evolve and change. But secondarily, for me, here's where I want to dig in a little bit. Again, the role of the prophet for me has something to do with what do we see,
mhm,
right? And what are we willing to speak as we see? What are we willing to do or act? What ways are we willing to cultivate um, um, what it is that we see, and so articulate or so do that which we see that actually brings about a change. That, for example, with Dr. Price, he had multiple incidents. One kind of, you know, preceding incident that led him for a year to teach on race using his platform, and he caught hell. He also caught life.
yeah.
There were things that he said then. Then I too. It's interesting that you said you just recently watched. I too have just recently watched. I watched a number of those, and I watched that particular one. Maybe that somebody had it going in the loop, and so it was
Mhm,
up there. That where he called out CDP, um,
mhm,
and so it was it's those moments for me that I think, one, we're avoiding all of it, right? you know, and let me say we, and I'm saying in the collective we, because I am numbered in them. When you talk about the Black church,
It is
okay,
a self-critique. It is
that's right.
absolutely, we're in it. So
That's right. I can't
yeah,
run away from it. I was born in it and birthed in it,
yeah,
and while I rail against it, I
yeah.
also love this version of Christianity.
Mhm.
Got into an interesting conversation recently with some pastors about. I say there's not one Christianity. There are multiple Christianities, and there was pushback in that conversation. And I'm
How
hoping.
rational is that thought? It has to be so clear that there has to be multiple Christianities, because let's go back. Let's In the 1940s and 50s, if white people put on robes, right, and with their Bibles say that we're going to kill black people because this is what the Bible tells us to do, had a whole picnic around lynching black people, and then went to church that Sunday, we are dealing with two different Christians, because Mamie Till was in the same church, Christian church, but the Jesus that they understand has to be two different Jesuses. So you can't tell me that we don't have different or multiple versions of Christianity that we're practicing in America right now, in the West right now. That's rational, right? Because if my Jesus is telling me to love, and your Jesus at least allows you to kill people based off biases and prejudices, then okay, then we're not worshiping the same Christ. Like we
Right.
are. So I don't understand how that is not just a rational thought to be accepted. How else do you explain it?
Well. Here's you and I both know they can explain it or explain it away very well. And there's dogma and tradition and theology and theologizing that goes along with explaining away. And for me, listen, I'm not anymore necessarily interested in taking things away from folk, right? If stuff happens, okay, that's what it is. What I'm more interested in is, can we add a little more light and truth to it so that we can see better? Because I just need you to tell the truth on it.
So when you say you're not interested in taking away anything from anybody, what do you unpack that a little bit? What do you mean by that?
So yeah, we can't undo what has happened. We can't bring Emmett Till back from the dead. So I'm not, he was killed, and there was a way in which he was killed. He was brutally murdered. All right. I'm not interested so much in trying to undo that or undo that history, or uncover it and then say, okay, we've done it, make it go away. What I want is I want to dig further into the truth. What exposed what really did happen? Let's uncover the ways in which the system cooperated with itself, collaborating with collaborators that then created the whole context. And then here we go, the cover up, which was it was the crime, and then the cover up. What Watergate, for example, the 34 counts in this most recent case marked much of it. Yes, there was the crime itself, 4 counts in particular, but the rest of it is about the cover up and the lies they told around it, and the laws that were broken around it. So for me, yes, I want to say that was wrong, but I'm also interested, and I guess I should say I'm also interested in the ways in which the truths don't ever really surface and get told around what happens.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how it's we necessitate for not telling the truth we have these narratives, right?
Mhm.
That we don't unpack, that we don't speak to, that we don't raise, that we somehow we missed the mark. I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking I'm talking to you, so I'm thinking, and you mentioned Emmett Till, so I'm thinking about Lovecraft Country, the
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
the series,
Mhm.
and they one whole episode is about Emmett's funeral,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And one part of it is the commentary about the smell that was experienced by those who attended the services, who were standing in line. The
Mhm.
smell. That's a truth that the movie or the series was able to uncover. Now, of course, I know a bit more of the history piece of it, so I also giggle a bit because I know who preached the eulogy,
Mhm. Mhm.
a bishop in the Lord's church. And what also I know is that church, where the funeral was in the tradition I was raised in, the
Yeah.
particular tradition I was raised in, and we can talk about all of that. So for me, it's those truths, those nuances that offer for us some further grappling with what I think as the prophet, or at least let me just say, as I'm beginning to unpack it, right?
Mhm.
What do I need to be observing here? What do I need to be pointing to? Are there things to say? Are there places to go? Are there questions to raise? And are they not spiritual? Better yet, do they always have to be political? Could they be cultural? Could they be moral questions, right? And what are those questions? What are those observations? And how do we see ourselves navigating, not just individually, yes, individually, but also communally, collectively?
I don't know how we begin to disinfect our faith from politics. I I'm not sure. As early as you remember, and as early as I remember, the as Jimmy Carter brought the Christian evangelicals into the mainstream, followed by moral majority and all that cabal of the 1980s. Our faith has been politicized in ways that we see now as horribly toxic. Because when you say prophet, I think about justice. When you say prophet and say, well, what are we observing? What are we seeing? The prophet's role, his purview, is to see injustice, to call it what it is. And the prophet is a utility of justice to balance the scale of justice, right? To speak against oppressive systems and speak on behalf of the marginalized, right? That is why when Israel in the Old Testament had no power, the prophet, the power was to cry, the agency was to cry loud, to use your voice, to say when Jeremiah is lamenting and says, well, call for the women of mourning and let them take up a wailing in Zion, for death has called into our windows. Oh, that my head were waters and my eyes were full of tears. And he goes on to this lament. Well, that's using the power that you have, which is your emotions, which is your voice, to speak against. But in order for justice to come, which is why I asked you the question, someone must give up something, right? In order to balance and bring equity, those who have must share with those who don't have in order to balance the scale. The problem is we live in a carnivorous culture. We are in this West about how much I can have and all of these streams of income, and it's about me. And even our theology and what we're singing in church is all most self-gratifying. This is the best day of my life. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know about I don't know what you got going on, but today is going to be the best day of my life. And so we are not communal like that. We don't, this is again, and they always kill the right ones, right? because this is what Dr. King was talking about. Well, the beloved community, I have to care about my neighbor who sees me driving my nice car and, bringing in my nice TV, because if he don't have one, he know where to get one from, right? So
Right, right,
I want him to have what I have. That's equity. Like that's justice. But we live in an unjust culture, right? And it's the few. This is what Bernie Sanders was railing against, about what, the 2% pay less taxes than
right,
the
right.
rest of us, and they hold more wealth than the 98%. Is like, you rail against that. And the issue is, in order for it to be equity, they have to give something. Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know Negroes right now who aspire to be millionaires, who are broke, but think Donald Trump is a great president because of the tax breaks he gives to millionaires. So you're going to vote against your immediate economic interest, that perhaps one day I'm going to have more than what somebody else has. And it's not about voting for a collective, right? What's best for us right now. It's about, well, one day I'm going to have. I don't know about you, but I know what I'm going to have. And so when we talk about the prophet speaks counterculture,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
right?
okay, okay. I see you, and I'm with you, and I think I'm reaching for even more, because we want to talk about the history of this country. All of it is around empire. In fact, this idea of
All of
Christianity,
it.
all of it,
All of it.
all of it. So if we want to talk about the Christianities, okay, we got to go back to Constantine, 4th century, and there were all kinds of virgins. All of the early church fathers and mamas, everybody they all had their own writings. There was no Bible. All right. He called together a council in Nicaea in Turkey. Yeah. And he pulls them all together and said, y'all get in this room. Listen here. I don't care what y'all come out with, but we got to come out with I need a unified Christianity that's going to help me solidify my empire. The
Make
Roman
it a state religion.
Yes,
right?
That's right. Because he had claimed not the cross of Calvary like y'all talk about. It was actually about an X. That's the same thing that Jesus died on. He died on. Anyway, I'm messing with people. For me, I want to talk about, here's my point. I want to talk about digging into some truths. I want to expose and I believe just as much in talking about why we are here, naming why we are here. All of this empiric thing, being conscious of the fact I wear vestments. I have to be conscious that when I put the vestments on, I am representing, at least in part, empire. I got to say that.
Symbols of oppression.
I got to say it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I got to note that. All of it.
Yes. And I'm glad you at least conscious of that. Like I respect it. And I understand it. I understand all of it. But it's like, really, y'all just gonna ignore where these symbols come from and what they meant?
That's right.
I don't care how we want to adopt them and translate them over in our tradition, right? You are wearing symbols that were meant to give authority and power to a state religion that sought to oppress you.
Yeah. So here's another part of it. That I have to name. When I struggled with this 25 years or so ago, and I caught some heat, and I may catch some heat today when I say what I'm getting ready to say. We have, taken for granted that as clergy, we are grandparented into representing the voice of the state when we do marriages, when we do weddings. Okay, we by the power invested in me by the state of Now, I'm for a point. I took great pride when I presided over a ceremony in Massachusetts, one of the early ones in Massachusetts, where in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you just can't just jump up and go up to go in Massachusetts and preside over a wedding. You have to get licensure.
Yeah.
Yes, through the Secretary of the State. Sure. And I took great pride in sending off, doing all the stuff I needed to do when I presided over a ceremony, because it didn't, I had to be conscious of the fact that I had to get, recognitions and credential to do that, not just grandparented in as the voice without any consciousness about it. And that's what I'm grappling with. If you hear me tonight, I'm grappling with how do we start to invoke some consciousness so that you just don't. This stuff is happening all around us without a voice that says, hold on, wait a minute, let's slow down just a minute. It's going fast, and everything is instant. We got our phones and texting and all of that's going on. Can we slow down enough to hear what Spirit might be saying that may be counter to the prevailing winds or thoughts that are spoken? That's kind of where and quite frankly, our spirituality ought to have room for that, aren't it? Shouldn't it?
Well, it's spirituality with some depth to it, right? It's interesting to me, and I applaud you for being courageous enough to look at the truth, right, about what you wear, what you put on, and where these symbols and where these images and why these things come from, where they come from, what they mean. Because there are so many of your brethren and sisterin in the bishopric who just want to ignore that, right? And I understand their functionality, and so I'm not totally against it. I just want us to do it, be conscious, right? To know where these things come from. But it's painful to be conscious about some things, because in some ways you can be conscious of something and not have the utilities to do anything about it, right? It just kind of is the way it is. Why people won't go to therapy, because when you go to therapy and they tell you the truth, now what are you going to do? Do you have the tools to do anything about it? And you say, well, I don't want to, so I don't want to know the truth, right? And yet the Bible begins to say that, well, God desires truth in the inward parts. Truth is our companion. But if we got Black people who won't watch the news because it's too depressing, so we run from truth and truth. Good gracious, this guy running for president could not see the truth if it was Stormy Daniels looking him in the face. He could not recognize the truth. And so there's a high premium on these things. But let me ask you this, because this is what you're talking about are very serious issues. I think they have some great gravity. And I'm not saying you should denounce the bishopric and what these things mean and what it means to your local congregation, what it means to the assembly of believers that you are part of and raised you into the bishopric. I'm just observant. I see more of our colleagues denounce everything from their sororities to a Black sorority, right? Like it's not denounce sororities. They denounce their zodiac sign, whatever. They denounce, Pride Month. They denounce all these things, but they haven't denounced idolatry.
Yeah.
They haven't denounced capitalism. They haven't denounced institutional racism. They haven't denounced when even power that you want them to be different oppresses people. And again, I am coming out of a tradition of a little Leninist, a little Marxist, a little James Cone, all of these traditions that see oppression through the lens of the cross, right? And makes a critique of power based off the centrality of Jesus's cross. So that's where I am with
Mhm.
it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, Bishop, knowing what you know, I'm wondering, how do you adjust and fit yourself within this current church context, knowing what you know and knowing that if you say the truth, some of the brethren, the family is going to turn against you. Like,
Yeah.
so what do you do? Because you're not the only one. We're
Yeah.
like, Elijah said, well, I'm the only one. No, he was like, no, you're not the only
No.
one. Is where everybody might be in hiding. Everybody, not even in hiding, they don't have the attention
Yeah.
that some
Yeah.
other people have. There are
Yeah.
people who are preaching very clear
Yeah.
prophetic theologies in church every day. They don't go viral for that kind of stuff. It's all the foolishness and
Yeah.
all the craziness that gets the attention. So I'm wondering, how do you situate yourself
This is why I'm
in this
asking this.
space?
So this is why I'm asking the questions that I am asking, and I am making space so that we can be in discourse and dialogue. I don't know, to answer your question. I don't know, but what I do know is that I can no longer be complicit with what I absolutely know is absolutely ridiculous, and it just is. And quite frankly, I let go of being, popular in a certain kind of sense a long time ago. I had to let it go. I had to detach from that space because it was for me crazy making. One, two, absolutely just not the truth. We and I'm not trying to hate on nobody. I'm not trying to create, whatever. I'm not trying to hate on anybody. Just for me, it didn't wear right any longer. I don't hoop as a black preacher because I played too much as a kid with
Mhm.
church and black preaching hooping. So for me, I needed to talk and teach and share. And the hooping part, I let that go for other people who can drive in that lane. That's not my lane
Mhm.
uh, for me. And so I had to be for me. That's why I'm asking these questions, because I'm thinking of these things. These are critical things. For example, talk about Tulsa, and we talk about that particular moment in history 103 years ago. All right. And I asked, our brother, for the vast majority of your ministry, you were in that town. What did you say? What was your speech? What were the sermons you preached? What were the lessons to be learned? Boy, we've had several interesting conversations. And then most recently, I would say 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we actually came back to it, right? And he was actually he had, because of his ability to acquire some national attention, right? And he was able to talk, and he was talking informed by the conversations we had had. And so here's, I think we can make some, yeah, not all of us are going to be able to garner, Carlton Pearson's space. He occupied a unique space in the field. Uh,
Mhm.
Yet I could hear when he was on some of them national networks, he and I had been talking enough, and
Yeah.
others, so that his thinking and his articulations were actually different than,
Well,
than back in the day when he wasn't talking about that. Go.
one of the ways in which, and we'll spend a lot of time in the future talking about him. One of the reasons why I admire him is his ability to transform his thinking. Because you're right, the question, like, what was you talking about? I'll tell you what he was talking about because I was there. I was, you have to center him in Republican politics. because he was one of the few blacks who had entree into white evangelical political power, and he was in the suburbs in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So he was denying or pushing away the idea of race because he thought it brought disunity to the body of Christ, because we were at that moment where these white evangelicals were telling black people that it's more important for you to be Christian than it is for you to be black. But then they wasn't denouncing them being Irish or German and all the rest of it. We was the only people that had to lay down our ethnicity in order to be a part of this club, which, okay, but that was what he was doing, right? And he was deeply rooted. And I'm sitting in the balcony, a young black man from Chicago, and my politics were definite. I come from the school of Jesse Jackson and Harold Washington. Like, I am deeply rooted in democratic ideals, and I'm listening to him like, okay, if you can.
Skip over that if you wanna. Right.
If you're okay,
Right.
we'll
right.
see. And I think a lot of the dismantling of what we understood him to be was more about politics and about political power than it was theology. Theology was just a face of it, and that's a deeper, longer conversation we could have later. But the ability, and what I don't see in us as Christians, what I don't see us as a culture, is to transform in our thinking.
Yeah.
That, yes, I thought this about God, I thought this about culture, I thought this about church 25, 30 years ago. And with walking, I don't understand, Bishop, how we are Pentecostals and are supposed to be led by the Spirit, but it seems like the Spirit can only lead us back to where we've already been.
Oh my Lord.
I don't understand how we walk with God and stay in the same place,
Yeah.
and think the same things and employ the same language, and we say that God is going to lead us in the truth. It seems like we use the Holy Ghost in church as an excuse to stop thinking.
Yeah.
And to not grow and to not evolve. And I don't understand. It's do you am I making sense? Like, is it me? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, you're making good sense. And let's really be clear. If we want to talk about the Holy Ghost, as my people would call it, the Holy Ghost, the ability to speak in other tongues was so that we could communicate with one another, right? Literally, we were hearing tongues being spoken. This is that was prophesied by the prophet Joel. So see visions and dreams and that you named it. That something new was occurring. That something new was coming forth. Not reaching back into some make it like it used to be. The whole idea, "Make America Great Again," was a slogan coming out of Reconstruction era politics, right? It ain't new, it's old. And make it great for who? So I mean, just
for who?
Make it great for who and for whom? So again, for me, it's pulling. Should the role? Well, I believe. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just to hit back on the day of Pentecost, right? And our tradition, where we come from, it was the glossolalia and speaking and quickening and using the Holy Ghost as an agency to help us have church, which I'm all for it. Let's do it. But the miracle of Pentecost was that God gave the church a language to communicate to the culture in which they lived in.
Speaking to the folk.
Speaking, not what we understand as speaking in tongues, but they understood the gospel in their own language. And again, this is what we're not hearing. I'm not hearing the church being able to connect with the world in which we live in, because clearly either the Holy Ghost ain't gave us the language, or we ain't trying to speak the language of this culture. Because every time these kids, these millennials, push back on us about our prejudices, our biases, our short-sightedness, our blind spots, it's a trick of the devil.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's the devil is attacking the church. No, he's not attacking us. What he is attacking is your way of thinking that will not loose you to grow beyond the things you've been saying for the last 35 years.
Yeah.
And you get in the pulpit, and all it is a replay of your greatest hits, but it's not connecting. And so, since you can't connect the culture, you attack it.
Yeah. Yeah. See,
And that's not even in the church, right? That's happening
yeah.
on college campuses, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
kids, are voicing different ideas about Palestinians and Israelis and these conflicts, and the question is like that. It's like, oh, well, we need to silence these voices, right? Because we have been rooted in a way of thinking all of this time, and we're so convinced that we are right that any other voices that pushes back against us, we want to silence them. And it's so I think it's not just in the church; it's happening across the board.
Yeah. See, this is where I'm at right here. You remember this? We were when Ferguson jumped off. You and I were in conversation. In fact, you drove down from Chicago to spend some time with us.
Be with the people,
right? And one of the things we encountered there was the kind of irreverence that exists on the block, on the street, in the protest moment, right? Now this was Black Lives Matter 1.0, not 2.0. The version of this.
It was raw. It was early. It was
early. We didn't know what Black Lives Matter really was.
Yeah.
Trying to figure that out. And there was a irreverence, there was a rawness, there was a profane reality to it that certainly made lots of my churchy folk and religious folk. I want to say, because there were Jews out there, the Muslims out there. There was some not just discomfort. There was just out y'all doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And there were those who said, we know how to do it. Let's do it right. And I felt so bad that Reverend Jackson was out there on the line with the people and everything. He came to the mic, and my nieces and nephews in Ferguson shouted him down.
Yeah.
Because what they were and what they were naming was something that had to be dealt with. That was a truth as they understood it. Where y'all been? Right now, all of a sudden we turned up. We in front of this thing, and now here y'all want to come and jump in at the head of the line. And they was like, we love you and everything, and well,
it was the same way. It was like history kind of replaying itself, right? That was the same skepticism that John Lewis and SNCC had against Dr. King. It was like, all this happened while you cozying up to power. All this happened on your watch.
Yeah.
Right. And so they weren't welcoming to Dr. King. They wanted him out of Alabama. Like, we don't want you here. And so whenever conditions become worsened, I think, again, this is the prophet, right? And it was painful to watch what the experience Reverend Jackson had, and Minister Farrakhan, and a lot of other leaders had, that this generation had became more radicalized because they were more oppressed. They were poor. We did not know. I had no idea about the economic conditions and the systemic oppressions that was going on in Ferguson, Missouri. Who knew? How would we know? But they are speaking of the conditions of their lived realities. And now you want to come in. Where were you? That's fair. That's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. And so our brother, Dr. Cornel West, says it like this. He says, listen, I'm always looking for the conditions where suffering becomes then the way we hear truth, and the voices of those who are suffering those things then are able, then they become the mouthpiece, right? For they're the indicators. They are the light that is shown in some of the rather wealthy dark spaces, if you will. Wealthy unillumined spaces, because I'm a dark man, unillumined spaces where then truth can now be at least begin to be grappled with. And I want to say truth is not just a one-time and a one-shot thing. There are levels and layers, and got to pull it back and get down deeper, go underneath. And these are the questions and the circumstances that's got me spinning around and around and around at night. How do we who have this great gospel, if you will, the good news, right? What is the good news? What, and maybe I need to sit with it for a minute because I may not have the new, I just got to talk about what's happening.
Yeah. To live with the tension.
Yeah.
To live in the moment where this is the truth. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what the answers are because truth is immediately disruptive. It is not peaceable, right? Truth turns things on its head and makes a mess of things. And then we have the responsibility to clean it up. But if we have so assimilated, right, and we have got comfortable as the black bourgeoisie and our nice churches, and we got LED screens now, and we got lights, and it's beautiful and it's cozy. Who wants to disrupt this by saying, we need to the way in which the Christian right, because they're organizing right now. Like they are not being quiet. They are raising tens of millions of dollars to make sure that they capture the White House in November. And we denouncing sororities. That's the most important thing we got going on is there's a big election in some denomination in November and everybody's campaigning now. Like that's the most important thing we got going on. And I don't know why we are the church. For what?
Yeah. See this now you down my lane for showing up. You right there for what? What are we doing if we're not calling it, here's Iyanla Vanzant, call a thing. This stuff is messed up, right? And Dr. King said it. He said it this way. He said it back. This is 68 now. This is 67, 68. He said, listen, he was grappling. He was struggling with Harry Belafonte in New York City, and depressed, kind of, under a Paul. And he said, I've been, what have I done? Have I invited our people into a burning house? Right. And might we be talking about that? The roof is on fire. It's something. Can't you smell the smoke? Can't you smell this is foul? Can't you see that this? Yeah, we put our eggs in a hole over here, right? Watching the shiny and the carrot and the something other, chasing after something, and this is a whole heap of a mess. And I want to get in the mess and find let's tease it out. And I want to be in faithful conversation with people like you and others who are at least troubled like I am, because I'm troubled. I'm troubled at our pursuit of vainglory, right? The pursuit of celebrity. Lastly, and we had time, and thank you very much for being willing to chop it up with me. A few weeks ago, I was having a very informed conversation. I don't mind telling folk I'm over 60 years old now. Mm-hmm. And I was having conversation with my children. That's children, and they were putting me on to this Kendrick Lamar and this Drake thing, and they were chopping it up with me, and they were helping me understand and tease out. They would they had analysis, and they would chapter and verse on it. They was on their phones, and I was both informed and humbled, and also, if I can say this, godly proud that here were my children, and they were in the text. They were exegeting, if you will. not the book of some gospel or some Pauline epistle. They were exegeting the culture, and they were looking and articulating meaning for them, or questioning, right? Where should they be? How do they come out? What's important? What's meaning making and significant for their lives? And then of course they were engaged with me and mom around what it all means and what do you think about it? And we had a fabulous a time of retching around. And did we come out with ultimate answers? Absolutely not. But we came out of the conversation with more questions, and I feel like I was bettered, if you will. And now I know a little bit about this, about what the beef is all about. But more importantly, not just the beef. What are the interests? That are coming together?
Yeah, and I think that's so deeply profound that you had that dialogue. In philosophy, we talked about dialect, and hegemonic, modalities about conversations we're having amongst ourselves and the questions that we're asking ourselves. And I'll just tell you this, I know we're closing, but I think God lives more in our questions than in our answers.
Absolutely.
I always thought it was the conclusion of the matter that mattered most. But what I am seeing as I'm just growing and observing and thinking is that no, God is in the questions that we ask. The end is already the end. Like it's settled. Like we're people of faith and that's going to be what it is. But we experience God through the questions, the questioning. And it doesn't always mean that we're going to come with immediate conclusions. We are talking about some very complicated, weighty, historical issues that are put context within broader context, and it's layered and it's complicated. And I appreciate the complexity of it. So I don't have to go into the conversation saying we're going to come out with an answer that centuries of people who may be smarter than you and I wrestled with, right? We are part of the community of critical thinkers and people in the tradition of Baldwin and, Thurman, and all of our guys who were asking these same types of questions. And I think it serves our culture as a consciousness, because if we're not asking these questions, we become blinded by orthodoxy. And you tell me, when has orthodoxy ever served any virtue?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
When is our traditions? You know how many wars we have gone? How many Christians have shed blood and have their blood shed over orthodoxy and traditions?
That's right. So let's end it right here. But let me, you mentioned Thurman, and of course my mind went directly to Thurman. Thurman asked the question as he was on his trip to India. He ultimately, he and his spouse and another couple, and it was a small delegation. They went sponsored by the YMCA and the YWCA folk. He was chaplain at Howard, and he they went to India, and they ran into some Indians and some Hindus, in fact, in India, and they understood who he was, and he was in conversation with, and they were saying, "Well, why are you here? You're a black preacher, you're Christian, and and it troubled him, not the conversation itself, but the questions they were asking disturbed it troubled the waters, if you will, of his soul. And he came back to the States wrestling with a couple of things. And ultimately, about a decade after that visit, a little over a decade, he wrote a book called Jesus and the Disinherited. That book is a seminal conversation. It's a treatise that asks, that it fundamentally starts with this question: what does the religion of Jesus? And he sets Jesus up in a particular geopolitical context, cultural context. And he said, what does the religion of Jesus have to say to people, black people here in the United States of America, whose backs are up against the wall, right? And that's a question that led to, in fact, Dr. King and all the young Turks of the modern day civil rights. They struggled with that text, and I certainly can tell you, over the last 30 years, it's been sitting on. I got the book right over here. I sit with, what does this all mean? These questions. I believe God is big enough for our questions.
It has to be.
If we believe in faith at all, a Christian, a Christian faith, a Jewish faith, a Muslim faith, a Baha'i faith, a faith, I don't know what it's called, a hip hop faith. I don't know what you call whatever those kinds of things that are faithful to you and I. We've got to wrestle with the question of what does any of our faith say to it, right? That then causes us not only to think and to ponder, but also respond and react and act, right? And for me, faith without works is dead. It still is truth to me. It still is truth to me. And so that's the pondering. That's the wrestling. That's the role for me of at least one role of the prophet and the voice of the prophet that we can have. Thank you, brother. I'm deep in your debt, sir. Because I can call
not
you.
At all.
We can say, ready, say, let's go. And
let's go. Yeah.
We can go. We'll come back to this some more. This may not be. This is just part 85,713.
We got a long way to go.
Yeah, that's right.
Long way to go.
You all help me thank the Reverend Patrick Schaefer, the Reverend Patrick D. I won't go on to what the D means. I got several versions of the D.
Everybody does.
That's right.
Everybody got an interpretation.
And I appreciate you, man. Give mom my best, and of course your brothers a hug and a shout out. We will continue in this vein in our conversation. Listen, family, do me a favor. First of all, whatever your medium of choice is, like and share this. We're back at it on Monday evenings. We will be new episodes of Relevant Conversations with yours truly, Bishop John Selders. I appreciate you all. Blessings to you. Peace in the Middle East and justice. How about that? All right. God bless. We are.